My name is Rebecca Miner, and I am honored to serve as the superintendent for the Edmonds School District. Thank you, that's very sweet. I'm very nervous to be in such a large crowd, so that's very, very nice. Thank you. We would like to welcome you tonight to the Education Funding Crisis Town Hall. The people you're going to see tonight are a collection of individuals you have likely never seen on a stage before. I'm trying to not reverberate. You're going to see some folks you've probably never seen on a stage together before. But we are all deeply committed to the cause of collaborating on the issue of school funding until our students receive the public education that our state constitution requires. And to which they have a right. As I mentioned, I'm Rebecca Miner.
Good evening, I'm Rick Calhoun. I'm a campus supervisor at Eaglemore High School in the North Shore School District. I am also the vice president for the educational support professionals of the North Shore Education Association.
And I am Sandy Hayes. I'm a member of the North Shore School Board. And I am currently serving as president of the Washington State School Directors Association.
And my name is Matt Rem, and I'm president of the Shoreline Education Association.
And with us tonight, we have some of our esteemed legislators. Please give a wave as we introduce you tonight, and thank you all so much for coming. From the 1st Legislative District, we have Representative Shelley Clova, Representative Gina Joy, and Senator Derek Stanton. From the 21st District, please welcome Representative Strong Peterson and Senator Marco Lias.
And from the 32nd District, please welcome Representative Lauren Davis and Senator Jesse Solomon.
We are awaiting Senator John Levick from the 44th District.
And from the 45th, we have candidate Melissa Demian. And Representative Roger Goodman.
And finally, from the Washington Education Association, we have our Vice President, Janie White.
Our goal this evening is to help everyone understand why we have a funding crisis, some impact that lack of funding, and because we are educators, we have some suggested steps we can take to fix it. The first part of the evening will be spent with everyone here in the gym with a whole group learning together, and the second part of the evening we will have to hear from and speak to our legislators in breakout rooms. As you know, our legislators are responsible for making funding decisions about our schools. We are so grateful to have the opportunity to meet with all of you tonight. As you're going to see, we are 4 people across 3 districts joined in our commitment to make sure that you have the accurate information about the educational funding crisis.
All right, so here's what we're going to do. Because we're educators out here today, we're going to kick this off with a pop quiz. We're going to ask you some true or false questions about education funding. If the answer is true, we'd like you to remain seated. And if the answer is false, we'd like you to stand up if you're able or wave your hand. Are you ready? Here we go.
Okay, don't stress. In no way does this end up in an SBA report. So, here we go. True or false? The McCleary decision fixed all the funding problems in education. right, we're ready. Remember, stay seated if your answer is true, stand up or raise your hand if the answer is false. Oh, I think we got that one. Yes, that is correct. It is false that McCleary was the fix for all of the funding challenges in the state. Okay, go ahead and sit back down. Where did it fall short? The McCleary solution was based on formulas from 2012 and was out of date by the time it was implemented. Now that we are a dozen years out, the formulas used are even more outdated and do not provide the funding for staffing that is needed to run schools, falling short by millions of dollars per district. And you all have handouts with you that have examples for each district.
All right, you guys ready? Question 2, true or false? The funding crisis is because federal COVID dollars, known as ESSER, went away. And remember, if it's true, stay seated. If it's false, stand up or raise your hand.
I'm just doing what everybody else is doing.
Please do.
Once again, it looks like most of you are correct. You guys can go ahead and take your seat. You also get a little exercise tonight. The reality is districts spent the majority of the federal COVID dollars on providing personal protective equipment, improving HVAC systems, delivering food to families. The very few positions that were funded by ESSER dollars were temporary positions that included emerging issues such as filling health clerks or getting educators to facilitate remote learning.
All right, number 3, true or false? The funding crisis is because of declining enrollment.
Why would we have classes?
I didn't even have to remind you. Stand up or sit down. You got it? Okay. Go ahead, have a seat, thank you. Yeah, while some districts have experienced declining enrollment, they've adjusted staffing levels to be appropriate for the number of students they have. It's what we do. The funding crisis is caused by our broken funding model that is based on ratios that are completely out of touch with school needs. For example, the state funds just one classified safety staff person for every 5,063 elementary students.
So embarrassing.
So, as your enrollment goes up and down, that broken ratio stays the same. You can have 10,000 kids or 2,000 kids, and you're still going to have the same safety person. So go ahead and check out your handout for more specific examples.
Last question of the evening. You're all doing really well so far. True or false? Districts can just use local levy dollars to fill their shortfalls.
No!
Thank you so much for participating. That was false again. By law, local levy dollars are only to be used for enrichment, things beyond basic education. So the funds can't be used for anything even under the basic education umbrella. And the legislature capped our levies, so even our enrichment activities don't have the funding that they once had. You are truly a brilliant audience, and we thank you so much for playing. Give yourself a big round of applause. It is now my honor to welcome Lauren Gandridge, North Shore Education Association Vice President, forward.
You all are so smart and so well on the quiz. You must have had really great teachers when you were in school. Before we get started, if you are able to move at all in the bleachers this way towards the front of the screen so we can accommodate our late arrivals and make some space for them, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you again so much for being here with us to discuss this critically important issue. I'll give you a minute.
Follow directions.
right, thank you so much. Like Superintendent Meyer said, my name is Lauren Dandridge, and I'm the Certificated Vice President for the North Shore Education Association. Prior to being elected to this role, I spent 10 years teaching high school chemistry. You've heard about some of the issues and myths surrounding Washington's current funding model, but it's important to understand the negative impacts that underfunding has in schools and on students every day. As you can see in the table that's on your handout, special education is one of the primary areas where there is a significant gap between what the state provides and the true cost of services to school districts. Our first speaker tonight is an assistant principal at Shorewood High School and the parent of a student who received special education services. Please welcome Nancy Elder.
Good evening, everyone. I am a proud parent of a student who receives special education services, as well as a school administrator who supervises the special education program at the high school where I work. I have had the opportunity to see special education from the parent's perspective and as a school district employee, and I can say unequivocally, special education is basic education. I am excited each day to lead a staff of teachers and education support professionals who are some of the most hard-working people I have ever met. They understand the importance of their job. They do not shirk their responsibilities. Each of them knows that the outcome matters and that every student has to have a meaningful next challenge. And whatever that looks like, whether it is college, work, supported work, or additional transition program, our entire staff has been provided training in universal design so that the core content is accessible to each student. Teams of teachers are revamping their curriculum to make it accessible. Co-teaching happens throughout the core classes, and we make sure that all students have access to the courses that will prepare them for graduation and beyond. Together, we have created a school environment where special education students are no longer the lowest performing subgroup of students. I challenge you to look at high school's data in the state of Washington and see that. Imagine what this team of teachers could do if special education was fully funded. To better understand the funding issues we face, we have to talk about students. The students that come to mind first are those being served by the medically fragile and life skills programs at my school. These students have multiple disabilities and their needs are many. One of these students is Miriam. She wants you to know that despite being in a wheelchair, having tubes to do the most basic things, and communicating with a Toby, which is a very expensive assistive communication device, she has goals. Her post-high school plan is to work with Provale to help kids like her learn how to use a Toby. She has a voice. She wants to learn, and she deserves to have it be meaningful. She wants to do more than just sit in class. Miriam wants to interact with her classmates, contribute to group work, understand the class materials, and show teachers what she knows. Miriam will tell you how frustrating it is for her when, due to lack of staffing or materials, she is set to the side or ignored. What Miriam and her peers face each day just so they can have access seems daunting, especially when school staff do all the paperwork, follow all the processes to get what students need, not to have the cost fully funded by state funding. Small wonder special education budgets are stretched beyond the breaking point. The handout you have highlights just how much each of our districts must contribute to special education from the general fund because funding does not come close to providing what our students need to support their learning. Miriam's story is just one student.
She is not the only student in my building who needs access to a school nurse, one-to-one support from an adult who requires special training, access to assistive technology, and modified equipment and materials so that general education is accessible. All of these things are the wheelchair ramps that Miriam and her peers, like her, need to have a free and appropriate public education. None of these things would be possible right now without local dollars because the costs are not covered by funds we receive from special education. I advocate every day for inclusion because I know that all students have the right to the access, the richness of the general education curriculum. I look forward to the day when I can honestly say we have set aside our ableist attitudes and dedicated the resources to this group of students and get to give this group of students the education they are entitled to and indeed have a right to. It is, after all, our paramount duty to amply provide for all students, and most certainly those most marginalized, like Miriam.
Thank you, Nancy, for sharing your experiences with us and for emphasizing the importance of fully funded special education programming for our students. So you're not quite done with the audience interaction portion of the evening. So before we hear from some more educators, let's hear your opinions on something. What do you believe the ideal number of students in a middle school science class is? Go ahead and tell your neighbor, how many students do you think should be in each middle school science class?
20.
All right. I want you to hold that number in your mind while you watch a brief video featuring educators from the Shoreline School District discussing the impact that large class sizes and budget cuts have had on their students and their abilities to effectively do their jobs. Let's see what they have to say.
Class was maybe 32. People would talk about numbers over 30 as something to be concerned about. And this year my numbers are 38, 38, 33, 33, and 32. So a total of 174 students.
Running the numbers, we've got 80% of the staff who are in overload, and that's like an agreed upon number of the district, and agrees that there's a certain number of kids, that's the maximum that we should have, and above that you're in overload. So 80% of us are already there, and 45% of us are in double or triple overload. So what that means is that there's no place left to put kids. So when there's a new student that comes in, half the staff is literally out of chairs in their classroom already, and so it creates these really terrible bottlenecks, and the counselors, the kids aren't getting the experience that they should. They might not get the math class that they should, or they might not be in an elective that they want, because there's just literally no space. I had a student who had a meltdown the other day, and he's a really impacted kid. He's got a lot of trauma, and he's got an IEP that's like 4 pages long. And it took me so long to just see the problem because of all of the bodies in the class and all of what was going on, that by the time I got to him, I didn't know how long he'd been crying, right? And that was really heartbreaking. And then to sort out what had caused it at that point, it was impossible. And so he had a really terrible day in my class, and it was because I literally physically couldn't see him.
I think that if you were in my classroom, you would be surprised at the sheer number of students that are packed into a relatively small classroom. There is very little room to move between groups and around the room. And however, you would see a lot of engaged students. I have to bring the passion to every single lesson and make sure that they're all engaged. Everyone's got a pencil, got their notebook out, and going. However, I'm just finding this year with this amount of people, when I have 40, is that my max really feels like 32. And I even think that's a really high number. But when I have 40 in there is just 8 kids that I am not getting an interaction with. And that just really pains me as a teacher, because I really pride myself on getting interactions with every single student. And I feel like students are being left out, and it just feels like there's nothing I can do about it.
I work with kids who, a lot of them struggle with sensory disorders or behavioral disorders, and a lot of that stems from when I ask them what kind of a classroom makes you successful, they answer almost always with calm and quiet. So like a calm classroom is one where kids can engage, where students who struggle with some of those executive functioning things and sensory things can have a calm space to engage. And when you have 38 kids in a classroom, it is really challenging to get that to be a calm environment for students. And so I feel like there's been an increase in my students wanting to work outside of class or pulling outside of class because the classroom space is just too chaotic for them to engage with the number of students in there. Or there's so many bodies in the room that they just feel claustrophobic going into the room.
It used to be that we were able to cap class sizes smaller, like at 30 to 32 students. This year, at 36 students, I'm saying, okay, 36 is a full class. We have class sizes up to 40. And you know that for every class that's that big, students who tend to get lost are getting more lost. And that creates anxiety in students. For students who are struggling learners, that's less time for them. And so then they're down in the counseling office because they're lost. They don't know what they're doing. It adds to the stress that we see in the counseling office.
My message would be this is something we've got to do because we have kids who are simply not hitting the targets that they need to hit in order to be set up for successful lives for themselves individually, and also, of course, what our society needs in terms of workers who are capable and who are prepared to handle the tasks of the workplace and that sort of thing. So just really understanding that when we see kids, I have 8th graders, they're going to be in high school next year. And so thinking about them heading into those crucial years where, yes, their grades count for getting into college and all of those things, and knowing in many cases that they are not where they need to be and that I am stretched very thin in trying to meet those needs, I would say to please just understand the urgency for these lives right now, that funding public education is something we've got to take care of.
In my role representing the educators of North Shore, I hear stories just like these every single day. Student needs have gotten more complex. At the same time, the resources have become more scarce, and even the most highly skilled educators are struggling to meet the needs of their students. Before our next speaker, I have another trivia question for you. So according to State Superintendent, according to State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Chris Reichdahl's latest budget request to the governor, what is the annual funding gap between what our state currently provides and what our schools need and deserve? A, $4 million, B, $40 million, C, $400 million, or D, $4 billion per year? I've heard a few C's and a few D's, and the right answer is D. $4 billion per year. So it is no wonder that our schools are struggling. Our next speaker is here to speak to the power and potential of well-resourced schools and to remind us just how urgent this issue is for our current students. Please welcome Edmonds Woodway High School senior, Mio Masunaki.
Good evening. My name is Mio Masunaga, and I'm a current senior at Edmonds Woodway High School. When I think about what's most important in high school, I think of one word, and that is community. Of course, I'm sure we can all agree that education is important. However, I know that for learning to be effective, we must have community in our classrooms and school. I invite us all to think back to the COVID-19 pandemic when community was ripped away from us. How did that impact our students? Because I remember feeling hopeless, disconnected, and confused. And I remember when we came back to school, having community pushed me and my peers to re-engage in school both educationally and socially. Sadly, some of my peers are still struggling to re-engage after the pandemic, and they need more support to connect positively with their peers and their education. And sadly, the ability to create community in our schools is being limited now by larger than functional class sizes and cuts to staff who provide extra support to students. The cuts in our district have been forced to make due to lack of funding from the state have daily negative consequences for all of us who are attending school. Community in schools is so unique because it is built from being able to engage with all the different students in our class, getting to know your teacher on a more personal level, or having your teachers get to know you. All of these things are severely limited with larger than capacity class sizes. When I was a little younger, a class was considered large if it had about 30 students in it. In the past 2 years, a large class can now have 40, even 50 students in it. My most beneficial educational moments were when I had an opportunity to connect with the teacher one-on-one and thoughtfully go through things together. When there are 40 to 50 students in one room with just one teacher, this just can't happen. This is especially cruel to my peers whose first language may not be English, those who feel alienated from the school environment, those who experience educational barriers, or those who are just simply more shy by nature. Limiting engagement time with the teacher further exacerbates these pre-existing situations that already make having equal access to education difficult. While it is true that some students do not have to worry about these issues, the reality is that a majority of our students do. And their experiences and access to education should not be negatively impacted by things largely outside of their control. Everyone deserves to have fair and equal access to education that meets their individual needs and makes them feel like part of our community. Community is also what keeps kids coming to school. When kids feel truly connected to the people inside the school, both teachers and students alike, they will keep coming back. When community growth is stunted because of budget cuts, educational growth is also severely impacted and limited, or kids just drop out of school. The students of today are the voters and leaders of tomorrow. If our school community continues to be irreparably harmed by budget cuts, which have caused us to lose valuable programs and activities, have large class sizes where we can't get individual attention, and lose support staff to help students who struggle, we will not be prepared to face the complex challenges of the next decades. Please prioritize spending on education so the students who come after me will have the resources for a strong school community and an education that prepares them to be successful in the 21st century. Thank you.
Thank you, Mio, for sharing your experiences and speaking out for the students who are suffering now because of the lack of resources in our schools. Next, we will hear from someone who has spent over 30 years working in education to get a deeper look at how these cuts are impacting not just students and teachers, but also the building leaders who are doing everything they can to support them. Please welcome Meadowdale Middle School Principal, Joe Webster.
Thanks, Emil. That's a tough follow. Good evening. My name is Joe Webster, and I'm the principal at Meadowdale Middle School. Thanks, Mike. I want to thank our state legislators for being here tonight to learn more about the funding crisis facing our schools. I've worked in education for 32 years as a teacher, coach, dean of students, assistant principal, and principal. I'm also currently the co-president of the Edmonds Principals Association.
My wife is a teacher.
Hello. My wife is a teacher. My daughter is a teacher. My mom was a school secretary. My brother was a teacher. My other daughter just began working as a para in an elementary school. I only share, shout out there. I only share this because my experience working in schools and working with educators and other school leaders provides me with a lot of perspective on our work. First, working as a teacher or a school leader has never been easy. I don't think that anyone went into education thinking that it would be an easy job. However, there's been a significant shift in the work over the past 4 years due to budget reductions. As the principal of a school, it is my job to help our teachers and support staff to do their job. A big part of this is how we choose to allocate our resources. Those choices impact class sizes, course offerings, and the amount of student support we can provide. We've had tough budgets before. At the time, I've told our staff that we'll figure it out. It will be okay. We'll be able to do our jobs. Last spring, while planning for this year, for the first time in my career, I was faced with the reality that because of the latest round of budget cuts, we would not have enough resources to adequately meet the needs of our students. We lost instructional staff in most areas, so our class sizes went up noticeably. We lost paraeducator hours. We lost our registrar, and we lost our student intervention coordinator. These are all people who do important work in our schools with students, families, and staff every day. Despite these enormous gaps in staffing and resources, we show up every day and do the very best we can on behalf of our kids, but they need and deserve so much more. Let me provide a snapshot of the average class at Middledale Middle School, because it has changed significantly in the last 6 to 8 years. Our average class size has 33 students. Half of the students qualify for free or reduced meal benefits. 11 students are in the process of learning English, or English is their second language. 6 students have learning needs that require special education or other accommodations. Multiply this by 5 class periods, and that's the reality for a day in the life of a secondary teacher. This is not at all to insinuate that the students are the problem, far from it. I love the fact that I work in a diverse school with a wide variety of languages, ethnicities, religions, and life experiences. All 3 of my own children went through MMS, and I'm grateful they had a chance to grow up with a broad, diverse group of friends. This has helped prepare them for working and living in our increasingly diverse community and state. Educating students with diverse needs takes ample resources and individual attention. Our system has endured so many budget cuts and is under such strain that at this point, we offer our students neither. We are asking our teachers to do the impossible. They work incredibly hard to make instructional modifications, accommodations, translations, and all while attempting to maintain a high level of expectation and rigor. But classes are too large to effectively provide the level of individual attention our students need and deserve. Moreover, we don't have the tools and support staff to address the needs our students bring with them to class. Many teachers are expressing to me that they are flailing, frustrated, and feel unsuccessful in the job that they love. For the past few years, we've heard about educators leaving the profession. Some people believe it was because of the COVID pandemic, because the kids have changed or low pay. I don't believe that. I believe it is because the resources do not meet the expectations, and our teachers feel like they are failing our students. However, it is not the teachers who are failing. Our legislature is failing to provide the funding needed to have the instructional and support staff to provide. I guess you know how that one ended. The McLaren decision made in 2012 was supposed to fix the public education funding problems that have plagued this state for my entire career. It took a court ruling to get the state to finally do something. What it did was level the playing field by underfunding everyone. Now politicians try to shift the blame for underfunding education by repeating some popular talking points. Lower student enrollment is causing budget cuts. Maybe in some places, but that's not an issue at Middledale Middle School. Our enrollment has increased for 4 years in a row, and our staffing has decreased for 4 years in a row. Irresponsible spending. On what? There is nothing left to cut. Our teaching staff, office staff, custodial staff, extracurricular activities, music programs, maintenance staff, transportation staff, everything has been cut as far as possible. There's nothing left. A 2018 teacher raise that was long overdue. That portion of the McClary money was specifically earmarked for salaries. And finally, inflation. Well, given the state's regressive tax system that's based upon sales taxes, taxes are based upon the prices of goods, so we should be collecting enough to at least keep up with inflation. And Washington State is projected to have the 5th largest GDP in the nation in 24-25. In other words, we can afford to invest in our families, our communities, our kids, and our future. Andy wrote me a good speech. There's a reason why multiple districts from Moses Lake to Vancouver to Seattle are in financial distress. The outdated funding formula doesn't work, and progress only seems to be made when the courts intervene, and that is not leadership. It is the state's paramount duty to provide the resources necessary to operate a public school system that serves all of our students. That is not happening. I guarantee you that the only people who believe our public schools are adequately funded don't work in the public school system. I recognize that will take courage, political will, and potentially require you to make some difficult choices. But those are the burdens that come with being in a position of leadership. Please fulfill your constitutional duty this year and address the broken funding system so the state provides our public schools with the resources we need to educate today's students to the standards our community and state officials expect. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe, for your insights into why this moment feels so urgent for our schools. Before we get to our final two speakers, I have one last trivia question for you. In 2018, education funding made up 52% of the state budget. What portion of the state budget goes to education today? A, 38%, B, 43%, C, 48%, or D, 54%? What do you think? I heard a lot of A's on that one. The answer is actually B, 43%.
We're just skeptical.
So even though our state budget has increased in that time, funding to our schools has not kept up. To close out this portion of our program, we have two more speakers. While union leaders, district administrators, and school board members often have conflicting views on what is best for our schools and our students, tonight we have all come together, united in a shared mission, to advocate for ample school funding. This collaboration reflects the urgency of the situation, and it's a powerful reminder that we can all work together to improve the future of our schools. Please welcome Edmonds School Board President Nancy Cadams and Edmonds Education Association President Andy Knopfziger.
Hello everybody, I'm Nancy Cadams, I'm President of the Edmonds School Board. I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight to show your commitment to public education. Particularly our esteemed legislators are here to hear about this and to show us their commitment to public education. But to all of you in the community, look at you, who have come out to show the legislators that it is critical to fully fund K-12 classrooms, all our K-12 classrooms across the state. And I have a friend here to help us talk about the future. This is Riley. You want to say hi to the group? Riley just recently turned 3. He lives in the North Shore School District. In 2 years, Riley will absolutely be ready for kindergarten. But will kindergarten be ready for him? Let's think about the timeline. The McCleary decision that happened in 2018, you heard at the beginning why this decision did not solve all of the funding problems and in fact created new ones. Then in 2020, COVID hit, and K-12 funding formulas were temporarily adjusted for the pandemic. When regular schooling resumed, we began to see the budget deficits that were created by the post-McCleary new normal, and we've been watching those deficits grow ever since. In the last 2 school years, districts have cut millions from our budgets. For example, in the Edmonds School District in the 23-24 school year, we cut $15 million, and for this year we cut an additional $10.6 million. So over the last 2 years, as we're thinking about 2 years, we cut more than $25 million worth of services to our students. What does this equate to? It equates to our having to raise class sizes, as you heard from the teachers in the video. It equates to our having cut programs, vital programs like electives, like we heard from Mia and from others, including music and world languages. We've had to raise fees for our patrons who are also dealing with budget challenges. And we've cut support staff from all levels, paraeducators, behavior specialists, academic support, instructional support, and operational support. You can see in the pink columns in the chart on your handout what our deficits look like this year. That means this is what we're facing as we come into our next budget cycle, which must be helped with the next legislative session. You learned at the beginning that the problem is not due to declining student enrollment. With a funding formula that's based on a ratio of staff to students, yeah, the funding goes up when student enrollment goes up and it goes down when student enrollment goes down, but the obsolete ratios don't change. You can see some examples of the unrealistic ratios in the center of the chart in your handout, and then add inflation, so these deficits will just continue to grow. So what happens in 2 years when Riley and his buddies are ready for kindergarten? Well, there are 2 scenarios I can think of. In one, where things continue as they are, our state develops a reputation for not supporting public education, causing businesses and residents to choose to settle in other states, and that will thereby cause our state economy to worsen. Or the state legislature can see the situation for what it is, and that is the highest priority for our future, Riley's future, and all the kids like him, and take steps now to restore public education in Washington State to a level of excellence that our students and our communities deserve. Now to describe the state, what the steps that the state can take now to truly support our next generation, I'm happy to turn it over to Andy Nassiger-Meadows, the president of the
Thank you. We're here to offer some solutions to the funding crisis school districts are facing statewide. I've been president of local educators during other lean financial times, but I have never seen it so dire. Both district and education leaders are all in agreement that there is no path forward without a significant increase in funding. We are all on the path to bankruptcy unless the legislature intervenes. Some districts might get there next year, some others might have 3 or 4 years, but we are all headed to receivership, which is the school district's equivalent of bankruptcy. Our ask is that you, the legislators, develop both long-term and short-term solutions to make ample provision for the education of all children in our state as the Constitution requires. We know the root of the problem is that our schools are funded by a fundamentally broken formula. Long-term, we need a new funding model. Please create a state task force to research state funding models and create one that effectively allocates funding to districts. Some state models are built on the premise that the bulk of K-12 funding comes from local levies, but that is not the case in Washington. Our new model should recognize and fund the needs of students, not just the number of students. And you don't have to do it alone. We will help you. Please include district leaders, educators, and citizens on that task force. Our wisdom and experience can inform the work. Is there anyone here in the room who would be willing to give input into a new funding model? But we cannot wait several years for a new funding model. We need help now. You can't let another legislative session go by without truly addressing our most pressing needs. Here they are. You can write them down on your pads. We implore you to please fund special education. Number 2, fund utilities and insurance adequately with built-in increases for inflation. Number 3, fund the number of teachers and paraeducators and support staff to truly meet student needs. And number 4, fund substitutes for teachers, paraeducators, and support staff appropriately for us to attract and retain these vital employees. Funding these things now will keep us from having to make deeper cuts while we wait for that glorious new funding model. So, what do Riley and all the children in Washington State deserve from their public education? They deserve class sizes where students' individual learning needs can be met. Paraeducators to support small group work. Appropriate staff to meet students' social, emotional, and behavior needs and help them learn better. Up-to-date curriculum and library materials. A wide range range of elective classes that spark their passions, such as music, art, drama, theater production, journalism, video production, and world languages, because these all teach important communication, problem solving, and other lifelong skills. And so much more that are part of basic education, but no longer affordable as inflation goes up, but the percentage of state funding for K-12 goes down. So we are relying on y'all, the legislature, to honor your paramount duty and prioritize education funding during this budget writing session. We realize the solutions will require political courage, and we believe that you care enough about public education to take the necessary steps to meet that challenge. We would welcome the opportunity to work collaboratively and draft bills for this session. So please act now to restore public education in Washington to the level of excellence our community expects and our students deserve. Breakout session time. So everybody stay seated, no rush to the door yet. First, we're going to dismiss the legislators, except for those from the 32nd district, and the facilitators and our traffic directors. So the people who have jobs to do out there, please leave now, and then I will give instructions to everybody else.